Hello and welcome to Phuket PALS. Today we're going to be talking about the GED Social Studies exam, in particular, analyzing political cartoons. So political cartoons aren't going to be a major part of the test. However, they are a big challenge. They're not the easiest piece of media to analyze. And so if you have some experience and practice analyzing them and you know what to look for, it'll help you a lot in figuring out what they mean. So first, let's ask ourselves, what are political cartoons? Political cartoons are a form of art, illustrations, that are meant to make a statement about current events. They could be current geopolitical events, local political events, or social issues. Where would we find them? Traditionally, political cartoons were published in newspapers. It was very common for them to be published during important or controversial events in history, such as passing of new amendments in the United States or great wars. Currently, we would find political cartoons online, in magazines and newspapers as well, although print media is in decline. And you're going to see them on the GED. That's my purpose for making this video. But what is their purpose? What is the reason for political cartoons? Well, political cartoons are editorialized, meaning they go beyond reporting the facts of the news, and they're trying to push a certain view that the illustrator has, or make a point. Political cartoons use persuasive techniques. A lot of these we can actually find in literature. So if you've been studying for the RLA, you may actually know some of these terms. The first one we're going to talk about is symbolism. We'll go through each of these persuasive techniques with one slide and try to identify them in political cartoons. The next one is caricature. We also have captions and labels where they write things on the cartoon. Analogy, where they compare two things. Juxtaposition, where you compare things side by side for a clear visual understanding. And exaggeration, making things seem more extreme to make a point. Let's begin with symbolism, using symbols to convey meaning. Here are some commonly known symbols. We have the olive branch on the far left. This is a symbol used in Greece 500 years before Christ. This was a sign for plenty, and so offering an olive branch to your enemy would be offering an end to hostility. And we also have the dove, another symbol that's been used throughout history from antiquity to modern times. The dove can be used as a symbol for peace for many reasons. Let's just start with a white dove, white being a symbol for peace, and this dove even has an olive branch in its beak, a double whammy, an olive branch and a dove. Moving right, we have some symbols on the top right for death. A rather well sketched skull, a gravestone with RIP written on it, or the old classic pirate skull and crossbones that you'll see on cartoons for poisons, etc. We associate these with death, so they make a clear, easy indication of it. For money, we generally use the dollar sign or other currency symbols. And it's common to have a big old bag of money because that symbolizes a lot of it. On the left, we have some more political symbols. In the 19th century, there was a bunch of issues between the Democratic and Republican parties. And without going into detail, the elephant, as we'll see on the far left, became the symbol for the Republican Party. And the donkey on the right in the left picture is a symbol for the Democratic Party. These are still heavily used in political cartoons and in animated graphics about local politics in the United States. On the right side, we have two images. The top one in color, vivid color, is Uncle Sam pointing at you. This is the most classic use of an American symbol for the government or the military, saying we want you to join the war or buy some war bonds or Who knows? Depends what Uncle Sam needs that day. On the bottom, we have Uncle Sam not demanding things or asking for them, but welcoming immigrants, presumably in Ellis Island. I can't read on what's written on the sign. Judging by their attire, it's probably the early to mid 19th century, and they are coming to America looking for the streets paved of gold. Okay, let's go into caricature. Caricature is when an author draws a person with exaggerated features to make a point. These two political cartoons also include personification. So let's talk about the cartoon on the left first. Have a look, pause the video, read all the text on both of them, and then we'll talk about the one on the left. Okay, so in the left picture, we have a big old cliff with China written on it. There are some large, menacing missiles pointed directly at the small island with Taiwan written on it. On the top of the cliff, we have a big dragon, angry with bubbles around its head indicating it's furious, and a big exclamation point, and he says in the caption, "That's a threat to our relations." And what is a threat to their relations? Whose relations? Chinese and Taiwanese relations. Is Uncle Sam on the right with a wink and a grin selling a box of missiles to Tsai Ing-wen, the current president of Taiwan. These are much smaller and less menacing looking missiles, but there are a lot of them. So the caricature is of China personified as a dragon. It's big and menacing and angry. And also we have Uncle Sam. His big long nose is exaggerated and his crooked hat. Tsai Ing-wen is also a caricature. She is personified as she is drawn to be small and humble and old and harmless. And the meaning behind this cartoon, the deeper meaning I presume the illustrator meant, is that China, while acting aggressive and much larger and much more dangerous, calls the simple act of a humble, small, harmless Taiwan trying to defend themselves a threat to relations. Whereas their pointing of large missiles with a lot more potential violence is not a threat to relations. That's the implication. So we look at the political cartoon on the right. It says, Trump no longer a legal resident of New York, and why? And we have a rocket written to Florida, and we've got a caricature of Trump with a big butt and a overly exaggerated frown and hair coming out way beyond his forehead and a big old grumpy looking chin. These are exaggerations of Donald Trump, no matter what you think of him. If you look at a photograph, he does not look as unattractive and grumpy as this. And then on the right, we have a personification and of the state of New York. It's the Statue of Liberty, which is in New York, and she's holding a sign that says New York and saying Bon voyage, have a nice trip, or whatever that means in French. Good journey. And she's using her torch to light the rocket to send him away. She is also a bit exaggerated, as she doesn't smile in the real Statue of Liberty, and she definitely doesn't move. Okay, next we're going to talk about analogy. Analogy is when we compare two things to make a point. I found an old pre-World War II political cartoon. It's a bit hard to read. I can't even make out the words on one of the parts, and on this scale, it's definitely not going to be easy for you to read. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what some things say. Where Hitler is stepping, that guy making the funny face at the world on top, high stepping in fascist marching style, is Hitler, the perpetrator of the Holocaust. Where his rear foot is leaving, it says something I can't read. It could be Rhineland, where Hitler, in testing the other European powers, seized territory that was taken away from them during the Treaty of Versailles. The next step says Danzig. That is an area in which Hitler did seize, which was taken away during the Treaty of Versailles. The first step says rearmament, which was banned during the Treaty of Versailles, but Hitler ignored and went ahead and armed Germany against the treaty which he had signed. At the very end, it says boss of the universe. Underneath, with all of these men laying over, it says spineless leaders of democracy. And I'm presuming we have Chamberlain and the other politicians from France and Germany stacked underneath. I don't actually know them by face. So this is an analogy for the policy of appeasement, in which the British and French allowed Nazi Germany to violate the treaties which they had signed to avoid conflict which they were lacking the political will or economic conditions or the social tolerance to have another war after the horrors of the Great War. And they just allowed Hitler to break these deals which they'd made. And the analogy is that they laid down over for him or rolled the carpet out for him, common idioms we use for allowing someone to take advantage of them. This was in 1936. It turned out to be quite true, in some historians' opinion, that the policy of appeasement did lead to Hitler making a laughingstock of Europe and eventually committing horrendous genocide. If we move over to the right, we have another cartoon about the South China Sea. I'm not sure of the date of this cartoon, but since the South China Sea is still a hot issue for geopolitics, it could be any time. On the left, we have President Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama. Above him is written Asia. We're in this war room where there is a table laid out which says the South China Sea and presumably the illustrator's name and some pieces of military equipment laid out like pieces that we would play in a game. China is written on Xi Jinping's face, his angry face. These are also exaggerated caricatures. Barack Obama is overly skinny. He's definitely not emaciated like that, and his ears are extra big. His face is showing exaggerated horror. Xi Jinping is fatter than usual. And the analogy here is that the military operations that are being conducted in the South China Sea, because of the difference in opinion between what the Chinese Communist Party believes and what most of the Western world believes, that the 9-dash line, which takes up most of the South China Sea, according to the Chinese Communist Party, belongs to China and has for time immemorial, since they have maps from 500 or 600 years back showing it's theirs. However, the court at The Hague, which enforced the UNCLOS, the United Nations boundaries, disagreed, ruling that Beijing does not have right over all of the South China Sea. So in response to this, the United States conducts freedom of navigation acts. They bring warships and airplanes through the sea and airspace in the South China Sea. They do this in a geopolitical game. So it's been set up as a board game to show this. And the way Barack Obama is gently pushing the aircraft ahead is a analogy for how the United States tries to follow standard international order, but is obviously playing a game of using the ability to operate to antagonize the Chinese Communist Party. And Xi Jinping is not playing the game. He is not moving his pieces. He has overly stacked and overly militarized his part of the board, and he is just pushing Barack Obama physically away. So this is an analogy that's telling us that China is not playing the international game of order. Instead, they are using bullying and force. Okay, our next slide, we're going to talk about juxtaposition. This is where we compare two things side by side to make a more visual, dramatic effect. On the left-hand side of this political cartoon, we have some nice little mountains, purple mountains. Grass looks healthy, and a middle-aged balding man who's overweight, white American. It's very possible that he would believe in what is written on his shirt. It says, "Climate change is a hoax." This is a belief that is held by groups of people, and since we cannot prove climate change irrefutably, people have the right to express their opinion. On his side of the cartoon, everything is rosy. He's got a near smile. He's standing up on a piece of earth in a nice place. On the right side, however, we have a firefighter. Presumably, since there is a giant burnt landscape behind him, a wilderness firefighter. So, there is evidence of a recent forest fire on the right. It's a pretty gloomy picture. The firefighter is covered in soot. The trees behind him are burnt to a crisp. The earth is brown and blackened, and there is a glowing haze of smoke and heat. His shirt says, "No, it's not." So this is juxtaposing the happy thought of the world is fine and climate change is a hoax. It's just a trick to try to get us to pay more taxes or whatever the theory is, versus on the opposite side, no, it's not. Climate change is real. There is an extreme increase in forest fires, and I'm out there fighting them. These are anecdotal. However, they make a clear point of what the author is trying to say, that climate change is real. Illustrator, not author. Okay, we have one more here. We're going to talk about exaggeration. Please pause the video and look at the left. I think that you can find the exaggeration here. This is very valid to our current times since the emergence of COVID-19 and nationwide lockdowns. So if you've had a chance to look over that political cartoon on the left, we have a large billboard that says, "Coming soon, Amazon Supermarket." And then we have two small brick and mortar businesses, small family businesses by the size of them. We've got a bookstore and a grocery store. The bookstore on the right says, "Out of order." Should say out of business. There's a guy with his arms crossed. This body language says he's closed and unhappy. And then he's in front of his bookstore. We're led to believe his bookstore went out of business because of online shopping. And the grocery store next to him is looking at the proprietor of the grocery store is looking at the billboard with looks like he's scratching his chin, so he's thinking about it, looking at the sign, probably worried and wondering. The text above says, "Good luck," with a dark cloud around it. So we're led to believe that Amazon is going to cause all grocery stores to be out of business very soon. They've already planned for it. They're putting up their billboard. And this is an exaggeration of the effects of online shopping on brick and mortar small businesses. These large businesses are succeeding in the current economic crisis that small businesses are not able to survive. So although it's not coming tomorrow and they're not putting billboards up, that's an exaggeration. It's an extreme portrayal of what's happening. The illustrator's point, and he's trying to make it more clear, is that large online corporations are putting small businesses out of business. And I would interpret this to mean that the illustrator believes it will be complete. There will be a complete transition from small business to online big businesses. Have a look at the right. Pause it. Who do you think these people are? What does the text say? Let's talk about how it's exaggerated. Okay, I hope you had a chance to look at it and think about it. The guy on the right is Vladimir Putin, the president of the Russian Federation. The guy on the left is former president of the United States, Donald Trump. The blurb above Donald Trump says, people need to stop obsessing over my Russian ties. So, although we're talking about exaggeration, there's also an analogy here. Let's first talk about the exaggeration. So, in reality, Vladimir Putin is about 5 foot 6 inches tall, 168 centimeters. Donald Trump is 6 foot 2 inches tall, which is, I don't know how many centimeters, 190. So Vladimir Putin is below the height of the average white male, 5'9", 5'10", and Donald Trump is above the average height. In the picture, however, Donald Trump is roughly half the size of Vladimir Putin, and his hair, again, is exaggeratedly sticking out in the front. The point of the exaggeration in size is, I believe, according to my interpretation of the illustrator's work, the point is to show the power which Vladimir Putin holds over Donald Trump. So he is twice as powerful, etc., however you'd interpret it. He is much more powerful. And even though they're both old, Donald Trump's made to look unhealthily fat, and Putin is made to look as still lean and muscular. The other part we could talk about is the analogy. So we have the clever play on words with Donald Trump's alleged election ties to Vladimir Putin, in which he may have had Putin's aid through internet strategies, we'll call them, to win the election, the previous election, which he did win, and ties versus necktie, as he's pulling him by the necktie, showing he is pulling the strings. So that's the end of our Phuket PALS political cartoon video. I hope that you feel a little more confident when you sit down at the exam and you see a political cartoon. My advice for you when you analyze political cartoons is to read everything first. Read it quickly because the time is ticking. Look at the pictures. Try to identify the persuasive tools they are using. And then read the question and look back to decide which interpretation, what you can infer or what you can conclude about the illustrator's point. As always, good luck with the GED exam. Thank you for listening.